Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. Okay. All right, everybody. We're getting ready to start this shindig off. First of all, thank you guys for coming this afternoon. This is one of our membership meetings, and we're very appreciative that you've shown up to talk and get some more information. We're very pleased to have one of our newest board members here. I have Rachel here with Covenant. Thank you for showing up. Okay, very good. And we're very fortunate we had some meetings today to discuss our airline, and we are lucky to have Bill Tompkins and Matt Skinner to speak with us today. So if you guys can put down your drinks and give them a big hand here, and let them talk for a minute.
Thank you very much, Russ. Again, my name is Bill Tomsich. I've met a lot of you before, certainly not all of you. I've been involved with flight planning here at in Hobbs for almost 3 years now. I think many of you will recall my partner, Kent Myers, who has been working on the flight program here at Hobbs since 2010, I think, is when they first started engaging Kent with Airplanners and bringing in Continental, which was soon thereafter acquired by United Airlines, and has been flying Houston ever since. I think another milestone we had was in 2019, in late October. We had the inaugural flight from Denver. I know quite a number of you flew up to partake in those festivities. And that was a fun time. And then that last time I actually have been in here to the city of Hobbs was later that year in December, when we had a similar event like this right around the Christmas holidays. Kent is now officially retired. He's enjoying a lot of time in Florida, playing golf, going fishing, and I'm proud to introduce our newest partner, Matt Skinner, who comes from Telluride. Matt, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks. It's kind of a true house party. Everybody's in the kitchen, I think. Hey, just really glad to be down here, and thanks for welcoming me, and good to meet everybody. Still, of course, getting up to speed, and thrilled to be working with Bill now, and I guess hoping to fill at least part of Kent's shoes. We've all known each other probably 15 plus years now. Kent is certainly an anchor in our industry and in the air industry, in the larger air industry. Done a lot of good things for a lot of towns, and so hopefully I can slot in here pretty smoothly and bring some additional firepower to the show, I guess. I've been in mountain resorts, tourism, and travel 25 years now, specifically in air service development for about 10. I'm also located on the western slope of Colorado. Have clients with Bill, kind of spanning, we got a pretty good geographic spread at this point: Georgia, Iowa to California, Washington, New Mexico. Really pretty heavy in Colorado with several locations there. Really specialize in kind of regional sized markets, working with airlines and spanning the breadth of all size and shape of airline, from small carriers that we put into really difficult to fly airports to big jets that we can land out here in pretty wide open spaces. And just look forward to engaging in the conversation here and building on what Bill and Ken have already done, taking the ball forward. I think we have some good news and exciting options to add today.
Great. Thanks, Matt. So we had a meeting earlier today with the airline committee. We went to spend almost 2 hours in detailed Q&A and put together a little presentation here. We're going to run through this one really quickly. I've got shortened it to about 16 slides. We're going to try to do about a minute a slide and then allow plenty of time for Q&A. So what I'm going to try to cover here, we're going to start on some national trends that Matt's really going to speak to, as well as the pilot shortage. And then I'm going to talk about recent performance of the flights into Hobbs, where people are coming from and going to, what the fare structures look like. I'm going to talk a little bit about the airline strategy, and then some proposed strategies specifically related to Hobbs, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So with that, Matt, I'm going to pass it over to you to talk about some national trends.
Let me try something. How's that without the mic? I just felt really loud. So coming in, I'll just try to offer us a nice national overview. We know it's been a very exciting and unfortunately rocky few years through the pandemic. Almost looking back 10, 15 years, 2010, 11, 12, coming out of the Great Recession, all those economic challenges, but then also dealt with a pretty significant pilot shortage due to changing regulations. And then just as I felt like we had hit comfort zone, 2018, 19, bam, the pandemic. So, never a dull moment in the industry. Luckily, though, the airline industry was in a much healthier position in 2018-19 than it was in 2007-8 going into the pandemic. And so what we're hoping for then is a little speedier arc of recovery. This is the TSA throughput. You guys have probably seen this group of spaghetti quite a few times over the last couple of years. We're basically measuring all of the TSA throughput, all the air travel throughput in all the airports in the country over the last few years. Red's obviously the pandemic year, and then the others are building back up towards 2019. The good news is it's continued to march forward in a pretty consistent fashion. And as of last year, we were within 10% of where we were in 2019, and the first couple months of this year are actually even with 2019. So very much a positive kind of arc coming out of COVID, but there have been some changes within the industry, and some that have affected our ability to work with the airline's ability to serve different markets with the way that they've had to come back with some of the different things that have gone on as they worked through the recovery and attempted to reinstate service, coming to almost zero, in March and April of 2020. And so from that, we've seen a very scattered recovery. And this is pretty much what we've seen through all economic sectors, in the pandemic, where things didn't recover evenly across different industries and sectors, even just downtown, from restaurants to laundromats to whatever the case, all the way up to larger economies, larger metros. We saw leisure and beach destinations go off. We saw the downtowns of cities empty, all kinds of different variations to how the recovery occurred. And so with air service, we have also seen that change or that splattered recovery throughout the country. A lot of the coastal markets really suffered. DC actually did okay, where the central hubs, and this is good for us, really came back much more quickly. Denver, as I mentioned earlier today, was actually the largest airport in the world at one time, or the busiest airport in the world. Didn't last that long, but they're still hanging tough, in third or fourth. But that's great news for us. Houston also recovered pretty well. Dallas, Chicago took another minute but came back. And so what we're seeing right now is Denver is actually up 10% from where it was, and it's doing much better than a good portion of the rest. So out of this spread, this is the only group that's actually up from 19. And then as you kind of come down with the gray line, those groups are all still down anywhere from 10 to 25%. Some of the New York and markets, and surely San Francisco, suffered significantly, I guess we'll call it, and are really trying to rebuild even the connectivity they have out there. That actually affects us pretty specifically, even through that period, because if you've got 8 sets of flights coming into an airport that are connecting with our 1, 2, 3, 4 flights, goes down to 4 sets of flights coming in there, all of a sudden our connectivity performs much more poorly. And so it's great to see, and especially in our airports, and Houston and Denver specifically, that most of those banks have recovered, those sets of flights that come in there each day, and helping build our service, and Bill should cover that as he gets into some of the more specific pieces of the puzzle. As the airlines go, and I like this, you've got your American, Southwest, Delta, United over here, and kind of your mid-level carriers there. They took some pretty significant hits and have still not recovered either. So the far left blue is 19, I believe, or 18, 19 here, and this is current, and the dips in each one are through the pandemic. And you can see that they all dropped pretty significantly. United actually took the biggest hit of any of them. Southwest used their $20 billion reserve to go right after them and try to take a bunch of share. Didn't quite work, but it worked a little bit, and the others are coming back now in pretty good shape. What I do like about this slide is it shows just how much share those 4 major airlines actually have. It is 80 to 90% of the country's flying, and Spirit's not a small airline. Alaska, JetBlue, etc., Frontier, Allegiant, but you can see where they operate in scale compared to those largers. They still serve a great niche, and it's interesting now to see how they've also recovered. Business has certainly come back much slower than leisure. Leisure is pushing ahead. I think that actually helped the low-cost carriers come back, because for a minute there, they were taking the heavier hits for sure. And then we've even seen a couple new players out there. Breeze, Avelo have launched previous, but is recovering some of its markets in Sun Country, etc. Some of those kind of charter, vacation-y type airlines. But on the overall, you can see that they are coming back, and that United's probably got the steepest upward rising recovery over the last couple of years. One of the major pieces of the puzzle is the same deja vu moment that we had 10 years ago. And as we joked earlier, when all the airlines were breaking their arms, patting themselves on the back by retiring all of these senior pilots to save themselves money in the early stages of the pandemic, all of us who work with or live in or are flying in and out of regional markets were raising our hands as high as we could and screaming, please don't do that. And sure enough, a year and a half later, 2 years later, we were dealing with probably a more critical pilot shortage almost than we saw 10 years ago. And what's happened then is it's accelerated some of the issues that they predicted 10 years ago with smaller plane flying. So if you only have a certain number of folks out there, or a certain number of pilots out there, you're trying to recover a major amount of capacity, you're gonna put those pilots in bigger planes. And so with that, then all of a sudden you see 50-seaters parked all over the desert from here to Nevada. And so unfortunately, some of them are coming back, but what's really occurring is what they predicted 10 years ago, where airlines are truly starting to eliminate and actively eliminating 50-seat jets. Luckily though, now we have the E-175 and the CR-9, some 76-seat jets that actually weren't as prominent at the time, and providing a possible better solution. But it certainly is a transition period, and there's quite a few markets out there that have lost entireties of service, 50%, 60%, et cetera, of their service. And the idea then is to position yourself to build your market as strong as you can, graduate on up to those 76-seat jets, and keep on moving forward. With that, the outlook a year ago was probably, well, was far more bleak than what it is right now. A year ago, Bill was in my conversation with the airlines. We're not going to see any loosening of this until 2024 at the earliest, and we're starting to hear end of 2023. And a lot of it's because of very proactive, maybe we did learn something from the last one 10 years ago, because there's certainly a lot more proactive and individual efforts out there. United started their own flight school. They're partnering with colleges. They're working much more closely with regional airlines. As we joked earlier, they're still stealing all of the regional airlines pilots to the tune of like 1,000 a month in certain cases. But at the same time, they're also working with even the folks who feed those regional, like the small commuter airlines, and everybody working together to create pilot training and advancement programs so they can get their 1,500 hours and get up and move up into the major airlines, and hopefully take the kind of chokehold that's been on airline resources for at least the last year, if not longer, and loosen that up. Hopefully, we'll see by the end of this year, and that's kind of what's been communicated to us. So we'll keep you updated on that as it goes. And with that, then, we hope to see a lot more of those routes return. In a specific instance, I have a market that lost all of its service. We're working to get it back. The airline flat told me, we hate taking dots off the map. We don't want to do it. I don't have a pilot for you until 2024. And so ultimately, they do want to recover their entire networks, and they want to build their entire networks. It's just a matter of regenerating all the resources that they need to do it. I think that's all we have for today on that. And so with that, overall airline outlook, pretty healthy. They're back to positive cash flow post-COVID. They're posting profit margins. Unfortunately, their costs have gone up dramatically, so fares, unfortunately, are reflecting that, which Bill will also cover here. But at the same time, the overall airline industry is kind of emerging, I would say, from the pandemic. How do you hiccup? It's the right word for that. Breaking the pattern. Anyway, from the pandemic period, the difficult period where they really had gone to zero and now back all the way up, and watching all that traffic rebuild itself through the country. And so ultimately, that boat will hopefully help lift all boats, including the options that we have out there.
Well put, Matt. Thank you. So with that industry overview, I'm going to kind of take it home here to what's been happening here at Hobbs. And so I'm going to look at a number of metrics. The first thing I'm going to talk about is reliability. And this is one area where Hobbs has been doing really, really well. This chart shows the number of flights that have been completed by month, the last 12 months through at the end of February, and the percentage that are on time, what we call on-time performance, OTP. Out of the last 12 months, 10 of those months didn't see one single canceled flight out of the Hobbs Airport. That is pretty extraordinary. August saw a handful of cancellations, and so did January, and that's all because of weather in Houston that forced those cancellations. And even then, I'd say Commute Air has done a really good job at attempting to salvage the flights whenever they could. There are a couple of situations where they couldn't send a plane to Houston because of the weather there, but they salvaged the inbound, and then they ferried the plane to, say, McAllen, Texas, to salvage one of their flights, so the plane would be back in position for the next day. They've been really clever about how they've been working the schedules to minimize the flight cancellation impacts, and as a result, this is how Hobbs compares to Midland and Lubbock on those same metrics. They're just 2 months earlier because I only have that data through the end of November. But 99% completion for the 12 months ended November 30th at Hobbs versus 97% for both Midland and Lubbock. Ditto on the on-time performance, 85% for Hobbs, 77 to 78% for Midland and Lubbock. Load factors, percentage of seats sold. That's another metric that is coming back. The green line represents this is basically 7 years of consecutive load factors. In February, most notably for Houston specifically, it was the strongest monthly load factor that the Houston Hobbs flight has ever achieved, going all the way back to 2010. So that is definitely good news. Similar with Denver. It's only been flying since 2019, but January and February, we saw absolute record load factors. They're not as strong as they are in Houston, but certainly much better than they were before. So that's part of the equation. The other part of the equation is average fares, and this is a double-edged sword, particularly for this community that is on the hook for such a substantial MRG, or minimum revenue guarantee, that totaled more than $4 million of exposure this year. You want to see stronger fares because that's going to reduce the community's liability towards the MRG. So we're starting to see some strengthening of the fares. They're not quite back to pre-pandemic levels, even though the load factors are. But once the load factors get back, then the fares start coming back as well. That's one of the reasons you're actually starting to see some pretty tough, expensive fares out there selling for the summer, because their airlines are all anticipating very strong demand. Of course, their cost structures have already gone up, as Matt alluded to. The third piece is, where are these people coming from and going to? This is what we call an O&D report, or the top flow markets. And not surprisingly, Houston and Denver are the two top flow markets for Hobbs. Houston being by far number one. But look at what happened to Denver. This is an interesting comparison of the year ended September 30th, 2021 to the year ended September 30th to 2022. Denver, which was reinstated their nonstop service to Hobbs on Halloween of 2021, saw a 1,300% increase in the local O&D traffic. So clearly, new flights from new markets do stimulate new traffic. What's also interesting, not just Denver, but also all these connecting markets. So going down this list, a lot of you probably aren't familiar with these three-letter codes, but I talked about Houston and Denver. The number 3 market was Orlando, that's MCO, then followed by LAX, which actually saw an 83% increase, and that again is because of the new service from Denver. On down the list from there, you got DFW. I'm pleased to see how strong that was. ORD is Chicago, MSY is New Orleans, Austin, San Francisco, Atlanta, LaGuardia. Rounding out the top 12 is Cancun, obviously a popular leisure destination. Lafayette, Louisiana, is also popular, always has been a popular connecting point for San Diego and Salt Lake City. Also saw huge growth because of Denver. Nashville, Tampa, Boston, Minneapolis, Newark, Las Vegas, 317% growth because of the Denver flight. Phoenix, Miami, McAllen, Texas, and Kansas City. These are the top 25 connecting markets for Hobbs right now. The list goes on down to like over 100 connecting markets. And what's really interesting is a lot of these account for less than 1% of all the traffic coming in and out of Hobbs on an annual basis. But you add all those 1% together through the United's incredibly powerful connecting hubs in Denver and Houston, and you can connect not only the entire country, but the world. Fares. Okay, one of the things that United has really been focusing on lately, and I'm really pleased to see this, is how their fare structures are aligned against Midland and Lubbock. There is a small contingent that went to Chicago in December of 2019 to meet with the revenue managers and the network planners at United. And we were told at that point in time their intention was to index Hobbs at a reasonable premium over Midland and Lubbock. That hasn't always been the case. We've been keeping an eye on those fares, but more recently, we had some problems with Denver. Houston has generally been indexed at about $30 each way above whatever the fare might be out of Lubbock or Midland. Now Denver is in that same category. So this is a super simplified fare structure that illustrates the 21-day advance purchase round trip, the 21-day advance purchase one way, 14, 7, and 0 APs. A 0 AP is basically a walk-up fare if you were to buy a ticket to fly out tomorrow, for example. So they get progressively higher the closer in that you wait. And this is just a snapshot of Houston and Denver, but in every case, the structures of these fares are now in alignment with what United intended, which is to be Midland plus $30 each way. You won't always find that to be the case when you're shopping for fares, because there's so many other variables. Again, this is I've shown you 5 fare structures, and there really are about 80. And it's a really complex issue on how airlines price, and then you have all the different connecting markets and availability on the downline connecting flights that also impacts the fare that ultimately might show up in a shop that you would do on United.com. So now we're going to talk about sort of United's strategy moving forward. And this is a quote from Mark Whitehopper, who several of us who were there in December met in network planning. He's now been promoted to the Director of Domestic Planning. And their goal at United Airlines, especially based on the fleet announcements they recently made with some huge orders for a lot of Boeing and Airbus aircraft, is they're going to be replacing a lot of the regional jets that fly across their network with larger mainline narrow-body equipment. United as an airline was heavily overutilizing the CRJ-200s, those 50-passenger jets, when they're really useful for markets like Hobbs and other small communities, but they were flying them places like Chicago to Atlanta, where they really should be flying mainline flights. So the ultimate strategy for United with their massive fleet acquisition and their investment in new planes is to build up their mid-con hubs, of which they have 3. It's Houston, Denver, and Chicago. And if you picture the geography of these 3 hubs, it's like a triangle in the middle of the United States. They're all about equidistant from one another. And to quote Mark, he says that they're focusing on really robust connectivity through these 3 mid-con hubs. And they eventually want to work their way up to 650 daily departures from each. The one hub that couldn't get there was Denver, but now with all the new gates they've opened in the past 2 years that were constructed during the pandemic, they have these new gates available. So the United has gone from 66 gates in Denver to 100 today, which has really increased the size of the flight banks that they can operate through multiple time channels throughout each day. And Mark's great quote here is, we're going to create a domestic network that will be conducive of getting lots of folks from anywhere to everywhere. So that's going to mean more flight choices, and this is why Matt said they don't want to cut dots from the route map. They've been forced to cut a number of them recently, but at least Hobbs has stayed in there. And in terms of moving forward, this is basically my closing slide here. Costs are going to go up, but all the indicators for Hobbs are trending in the right direction. And load factors are definitely trending up. Fares are not where they were before, but they're definitely heading in the right direction. 50-seaters, you've probably heard, they're in much smaller numbers, but they're not about to disappear from United's fleet just yet. We learned earlier this morning that Delta wants to have them all gone by July 1 of this year. United has probably another year, maybe 2 years before you see the end of this CRJ-5 or the 50-seaters. But in terms of priority, whoops, I went back too quick. Yeah, just reset there, Matt. Thank you. In terms of priority, is going to be trying to rebuild the frequency we have from Denver. Right now, we've got daily service out of Houston, and we have 3 flights per week out of Denver. And that is the weakest link we have right now, is it's a really off-balance schedule with flights on Sundays, Mondays, and Fridays. What we would like to see, and what we've requested for United to consider, is to go back to 6 flights a week out of Denver, and that would bring Hobbs back to 13 flights a week total that we know the community supported for many, many years in a row. And in 2019, these flights were actually profitable. We also need to prepare for larger gauge aircraft. We talked to Corey Needham earlier today in terms of some of the TSA upgrades that will be required. It's going to be at least a year away. But I am confident, and we've already told United this, that this is a market that can support 70 to 76 seat aircraft. And the nice thing about that is the economics are so much better than the 50-passenger aircraft because the per seat unit costs are lower. And you also have first-class cabins and in-flight Wi-Fi on these aircraft that, this is additional revenue opportunities on these flights. People will pay extra for those first-class cabins. And then the final opportunity here is going to be pitching another airline possibility. So I'm going to switch gears here to a different presentation to talk about an airline called JSX. And have any of you heard of Jet Suite X, other than those who are already in the presentation earlier today? They're actually based out of Texas. Here we go. And this one I'm going to have to drive from over here. Well, I got to close the other presentation and get out of screen mode. There we go. Close that. Okay, JSX. They are a Part 135 operator based out of Texas that operates 50 passenger, would be 50 passenger regional jets, 145. Yeah, let's just scroll down through here, Matt. And they're configured for 30 passengers, and that allows them to operate under what's known as a Part 135. And the aircraft are the same ones that fly for United Express, but with a much nicer interior, and they're also exempt from going through TSA. This is what the interior of these flights look like. They're flying already into a couple of other clients that we work with. They've been flying into Mammoth Lakes in the past. They had a huge success flying into Gunnison, Colorado last summer. Basically, it's first-class service, except for the fact that you don't have to check in an hour and a half in advance. You know, you literally hop on, hop off jet service. You show up 20 minutes before your flight. They check you off on the flight attendant who comes in on the inbound flight actually checks you in at most of these outstations. They check your name off on their iPad, and away you go. And now let's scroll down a little bit further and look at the route map. Right here, perfect. And what you'll see here is they have operations in Dallas Love Field, Phoenix, Las Vegas, Burbank, and this is what their whole route structure looks like. They've got one flight up to White Plains. Some of you may be familiar with Lajitas Golf Resort. They fly charter flights down there. They started flying from Dallas to Gunnison last summer. In fact, look at all these routes they have in Colorado. Those all started within the past year. They didn't even fly to Colorado until last June. This is a growing airline that has taken delivery of a lot of these Embraer 145s. They have pilots available, unlike SkyWest Airlines that's facing a real pilot shortage. And they're planning on taking delivery of one new aircraft a month for the next 2 years. So they are on a growth strategy. They've figured out a product and a price point that people seem to be willing to pay. I was meeting with their VP of Business Strategy when I was in Dallas in November. We just started shooting the breeze, and we actually talked about Hobbs. And I asked if this is something that might be interested in. And the answer is yes. They would be interested in taking a look at this. This is why I presented this as an opportunity to the airline committee earlier today. It sounds like there's some excitement for the possibility of using JSX to operate a Part 135 flight. Probably initially from Dallas, because you saw on an earlier slide, Dallas was the #1 O&D market behind Houston, Denver, and then Orlando. But other possibilities would include Vegas or Phoenix, because they already have pretty strong operations in there. The other interesting thing about JSX, and this only happened 8 months ago, is they're not a competitor against United. They're actually a United Mileage Plus partner. So passengers who fly JSX will earn United miles. So this is an interesting opportunity that certainly I got clear direction from the airline committee to see if we can make this happen. So that's what I'm going to close with, and I think it's an exciting opportunity. And with that, we'll leave some time for questions.
Would you like to go ahead and talk about the Southwest connections at Dallas?
Yeah, okay, I'm a little less, let's say, as far as Dallas Love Field is concerned, as you know, that's a major Southwest operation. They don't really call it a hub. It's more point-to-point service, but the Dallas operation at Southwest grew significantly when the Wright Amendment went away. So they were able to fly instead of just within Texas and to adjacent states. You know, that's the reason Albuquerque lost a lot of service when the Wright Amendment went away, because they were able to fly those flights nonstop into Dallas Love Field, and of course Southwest also grew the Denver operation. JSX is more of a point-to-point flight, but there will be naturally occurring connectivity possible with Southwest, but they operate on the north side of the airport, so you have to figure out how to get around. They've got plenty of Ubers available where JSX lands. That's how I got into and out of their operation for the meetings I had in November. But once you get to Dallas, you can literally fly anywhere on Southwest Airlines. Matt, anything you wanted to add to that?
No, it's just, you know, as these things work, and we know Southwest doesn't play with anybody else, right? They don't share with American or United or even the small carriers, and so you just have to book separately. But you are brought into their portal. You've got JetBlue in there, and obviously it's, you know, it's their mothership down there. And so if you can work it out and figure out how to jump in and out, then yeah, it should be fairly easy. I'm sure that if JSX would welcome, you know, the added layer of business down there, maybe there's some conversations about FBO cars starting to run back and forth. But ultimately, you could Uber from that side of the airport to the other. But I don't want to create any illusions that there is like a book-through connectivity, but you're going to be at that same airport and can utilize it as you need it.
This would be a really nice complement to what United is already doing as a network carrier with the incredibly deep connectivity they have through both Houston and Denver, which is going to continue to grow in the future. Because United would never fly to Dallas. You know, they don't have a hub there, but JSX could.
Earlier you talked about number one priority, extending the Denver flight to 6 times a week. What is the timeline on that? What are we looking at?
I am going to push for that with the next contract that begins in July. So it could happen as soon as July 1. We know that the schedules are already set and baked through the end of June. If it doesn't happen July 1, I would say the next logical opportunity would be September 4th. That's the next scheduled break that United has.
As long as it's ready by December.
And you know, another priority could also be to add some more day-of-week flying from Houston. Once they get past the end of the pilot shortage, which there is light at the end of the tunnel on, they will have more resources to be able to do like Friday, Monday flights, for example, because those are your 2 busiest days here in and out of Hobbs. Mayor?
I'm not gonna ask a question, I'm gonna put some pressure on Jennifer.
Okay.
Wow, that's a shock.
Yeah.
One of the things that I would like for the group to be aware of is the legislation that's going through our state legislature right now, which could create some real opportunities for our community. So, Jennifer, if you would like to speak to that,
Oh, sure. So
whether you'd like to or not.
and I talked to Missy this morning just to get a little, and she hasn't emailed me back, but there are some grant opportunities that are available potentially for a 30-seat and maybe up to 100-seat. And so, carrier. So what we're looking at is using every opportunity for state funds to help backfill this project to make it much more sustainable. And so we will, Bill and Nat and I met this afternoon to talk about what does that look like, how quickly, and they assured me that we could do this very quickly, apply for those funds once they are made available. But we think that there's a lot of state momentum for these for 30-seaters and up to 100-seaters. So we will absolutely use our resources to try to get as many state funds and have the state as a you know a real part of the Fly Hobbs system.
And also, there's another bill in the legislature that has basically flown through all the committees, which would provide up to $22 million in money available for the Lee County Regional Airport for capital improvements. So, you know, all of that makes our destination better and better. So we're going to continue the airline committee and working with the county and the city and the EDC. We'll continue to look at every opportunity to continue to improve access as well as opportunities for our community to have a window to the world, right?
And
These guys are doing a great job.
One last thing I'll say real quick about economic development is having commercial service to your community is almost a base requirement.
Sure.
So we think this is extremely important to our ability to grow both in jobs and big projects, that we compete with larger communities because we have the airport and because we have commercial jet services. That's why it's so important for the EDC, is we see this as, you know, just table stakes. And so I really appreciate the county and the city's involvement.
Well, I'll just dovetail off that. What I was going to say is, like, we applaud you all for the collaboration that goes on here, the funding, the support behind the air program, and New Mexico and the larger programs, as we talked about today, put you ahead of quite a few other states. And the fact is that makes a material difference when Bill and I go sit down at United and American, and you have sustained funding and community support. They recognize that and will move you to the head of the class, so to speak. And it really does materially change how you're able to plan and hopefully generate secure air service. And so, you know, we'll keep at it. And whatever we can help with on those other ends, as we're already in conversation, we will continue to do so. We have multiple other cities that do engage in those conversations and are glad to offer any perspective or help that might be going, but you guys kind of have it down and have for a while. And it's very impressive, and hopefully we can take those assets out there and keep pushing the ball forward.
I can't underscore that comment enough. What this community came through with last year was a really tough conversation that we had with United and with you all, because United had no choice but to renegotiate the cap because they were losing so much money. I will admit, we were a bit too aggressive in restoring capacity to go to 3 flights daily, and this community was really ready to support. And the fact that United figured out a very creative solution that was within what, it wasn't quite what the community could afford, it was definitely beyond, to go to $4 million on the annual cap. And by the way, I mentioned to the airline committee earlier this morning, we're 7 months through this 12-month contract, and based on year-to-date results, contract year-to-date results, plus the projections that we've made, very conservative projections through the end of this year, it looks like we're going to come in about $700,000 under that cap. So that is really good news that for you all and also for United. I mean, they're looking at that. This puts us in a much stronger negotiating position to renegotiate next year's contract than if we had already blown through the cap, which is exactly what happened last year. The costs are going to go up, and there's no question about it. I mean, all the airlines have had to increase their pilot pay, particularly the regionals. So we don't know what the costs are going to be, but be prepared. It's going to be, the actual price tag on a per flight basis is going to go up substantially, which is why eventually we want to move to those 76 seaters, because the per unit costs and the economics are so much better on those larger aircraft, and they're also, it's a much better product, for this community. And that's the whole strategy for United Airlines is, and all the major carriers, is to move away from the 50 seaters as the market dynamics allow.
Bill, on the JSX proposal, so to speak, is there a sweet spot 3, 4, 5 times a week of service?
Yeah, they have a couple of markets where they're going twice a day, like Denver to Dallas. They're competing head-to-head against both American and Southwest Airlines. But yes, a lot of their outstations, their smaller markets, they are not afraid to do 2 flights a week, 4 flights a week, 6 flights a week, whatever. They're a much more flexible airline than a United or any of the network carriers.
Well, like what we've seen with Denver, I think the 3 flights is really difficult.
Yes, it
just
is.
making the connection going and coming in the same week. So when you visit with them about putting a proposal together, I would try to get as many one-day flights at a minimum for us to look at, to evaluate it. Because
Sure.
I think that is really important to have that daily service to accommodate those people that may have different schedules during the week.
Yeah, JSX does a lot of 4 flight a week flying. And like Donna said, they started with 2 flights a week, and the bookings were so strong. Before the first flight was even flown, they said, we're going to double down, and we're going to do 4 flights a week. And those 4 flights a week last summer ran a 90% load factor.
I'm gonna ask this really naive question. How, based upon the images, how are they handicap accessible? How do you get onto a flight?
JSX, yes, that's actually an excellent question, and I don't have that up there on the chart
Does it look
anymore.
like you had to use steps? Because I'm gonna assume that do you pull up to a gate? Or no?
No, but at the airport here, they would have ramps in it.
Right.
The FBO, it's kind of a neat deal because it's like having your own private aircraft. You go out there and hand your luggage to the attendants. They put it on the plane, you get on the plane, and then when you land at Love Field, you're not landing at the main airport. You're landing what we call the fixed base operations.
Okay.
And so it's a separate.
But those GSX planes are ramp accessible?
Yes, they're the exact same aircraft that United flies in here today.
Oh, okay.
They're just taking the 50 and taking 20 seats out of it,
Exactly.
30 customized 30-seater.
Perfect.
And because they're sitting in fields everywhere, you buy them for pennies on the dollar, why not? Yeah.
Exactly, that's why they're taking delivery of one end of the other right now.
To expand on the conversation a bit, our airport's unique in that we have a separate area. So that the passengers for this would go into an area where they don't have to go through TSA.
Gate
Of
one.
course, they would gate 1, they would walk out and get on the plane, and then when they got to Dallas or whatever the destination was, they would have to transfer their luggage if they wanted to go into the main terminal and get onto a scheduled airline, like American or United or whatever, they would have to do that. But we're looking at trying to provide opportunities for our community so that you could go to here or Phoenix or Dallas, if you know, just for the day or the weekend.
Yeah.
And never get on another flight.
That'd be great. Vegas.
Yeah, Vegas.
Vegas, that's exactly what I was going to say. Really good job, Rachel.
And by the way, Vegas has
Well,
just a couple
and
flights
another
you
thing
can
that-
get on out as
Yeah,
well.
another thing that we're talking about, if you look at their schedule, they're flying over Hobbs to go to a lot of other destinations. So we've asked them to talk to them about, could they add stop?
Yeah.
So if they leave Dallas to Phoenix, and there could be a potential that, you know, because we could probably put 10 or 15 people on it that want to go to Phoenix or want to go someplace else. So that'll be part of the discussions as we look at potential contract negotiations.
And a lot of times at the FBOs, that there's not necessarily Uber, but a private company that has this arrangement to carry you around back and forth. That's what I ran into.
Now, I think probably more than likely, if we were to enter into a contract with them, how our passengers were treated when they plane and when they deplane would be part of those contract negotiations to take care of some of the concerns for our community. That would be part of how we negotiate.
You know, I mean, if somebody here, I mean, who wants to go to Dallas, go watch, and I use the Cowboys as a, whether you're, go watch the Cowboys.
Really?
Oh, gosh.
Nobody wants
Love you, Grace.
Okay, go see the Rangers play.
So if you wanna go to a Cowboy game, if you wanted to go spend the weekend, I mean, drive out here but look at the places. Carlsbad, Artesia, Seminole, Denver City, I mean, the list just goes on. They'll say, I'm just driving out, it takes me 30 minutes to get there.
Yep.
Get on a plane, I can be in Dallas.
Yeah.
I don't have to pay for parking. I mean, it's like flying a personal plane, you know. Yes, they're gonna say you have bombs, you have guns, you know what I'm saying, there's still rules.
You have
but-
some security.
Yeah, you have some security, but the sky's the limit on this JSX. I am telling you, the sky is the limit. And if it works, think about it, Dallas, Orlando, Vegas. That's fast.
So from a corporate view, one thing that I just currently run into working for ConocoPhillips, I tried to catch a flight with a local private airline here locally, and wasn't allowed to fly on it because they didn't have a good safety or maintenance rating. And they were on the no-fly list for my company,
Sure.
along with some others that are in the Alaska area, because those are smaller, private airlines. Do they have a good maintenance and safety rating that we would be able to build out an MOU with, or some kind of contract where we could use them for our rotators that are coming out of Denver via North Dakota to down here, or, I mean, those are kind of things that I look at, not really from a personal use,
Business, yeah.
but for a business use.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there
You can also say Vegas, it's okay.
Tina, let it go, baby. Let it go, honey.
Well, I mean, I'll go anywhere, but I'm just saying that's one thing I ran into, but I wouldn't have thought about that. Like, I would have flown on this airline personally and not known that, but my company brought it to my attention that, oh no, you can't fly on that. That's on the no, they have a bad safety and maintenance rating. It's like, well, what the heck? I didn't even know that.
So in full disclosure, they are a Part 135 carrier.
Okay.
Versus a Part 121, which is what's required for, to be branded as, United Express or
Okay.
American Eagle. The big difference is the pilot experience, and also the pilot ages. Right now, the current mandatory retirement age for a Part 121 pilot is 65, and they're forced to retire. You can be over 65 years old and lots of experience, and you can fly a Part 135 aircraft with 30 seats or less. Similarly, there's a fewer minimum hours required to be in the right seat. Right now, you need 1,500 hours in order to fly a Part 121 carrier. That requirement does not exist for the first officers, although most of JSX's first officers have over 1,000 hours, I'm told. So they're pretty experienced, but they pair junior, relatively younger first officers with recently retired captains. So it's like a great program
Yeah.
that balances it out. And it is under the full guidance of the FAA. JSX has an excellent safety record.
Great.
There are several other ones. They're flying into Taos, New Mexico right now. That's the only airport in New Mexico. They actually won the contract to take over the flying that used to be operated by Advanced Air as Taos Air.
Nice.
So JSX is now the operator of flights into Taos. I would love to see Hobbs to be the second New Mexico airport that gets added to JSX from that.
And
Good to
did you
know.
not
So
say that, there's a partnership with United? with-
Yes, they are a Mileage Plus partner.
So if you fly them, you get Mileage Plus with United.
Yep.
at the same time.
So adding on to what you were talking about with pilots, and the shortage, with this JSX, is there an incentive for, retired military that have, been in 25 years and then they get out, and these guys in the military are trying to figure out what they're gonna do with their life kind of thing? Or former pilots in the military, is there some kind of incentive or program that they're going after so that there's not a shortage for pilots?
Just in general, so interestingly enough, yes, and the military pilots coming out into the major airline network usually are at the head of the class, right? They have the most hours, best trained, et cetera, et cetera. What happened during the pandemic, though, is that when the airlines went down to zero, all of that group of class stayed in the military and re-upped for another anywhere from 2 to 8 years. And so that actually contributed to, it wasn't just the retirements, as I was half joking about before, there were multiple factors, and one of those was that exact thing, where this entire group of military pilots stayed in. Now, hopefully, by my hard math, it should be another year or two before they start coming out again, and so hopefully we'll see that re-engage. But yes, they're highly valued and highly, I would assume, paid and prized by the airlines on every level. And generally, they won't go to JSX. They're going to go straight to the head of the industry most times. So,
Can I follow up on that?
yeah.
So I have a pilot in my family in the military, and my understanding from last time I talked to him about this, which has been a little while, was when he got out of the military, he still had to go through and pay for his own recertification in a heavy or whatever.
commercial.
To fly commercial. Like, are the airlines, taking care of that now for pilots?
They do have to get certified on the type, right? So if you come from flying F-14s, you're gonna fly a 737. It takes a minute. but I actually don't know the specific answer to that. My guess with what United's done with their own flight school, et cetera, that either they're helping or incentivizing or deferring or whatever the case is, but there is all kinds of looser and more aggressive incentives to get people into those left seats as quickly as possible. Don't know the actual answer. I will ask them. We'll find that out. But I would have to believe that it's easier than it was before.
Because that was about $100,000 ticket.
Yep. Yeah. No, there are a lot. All the airlines are moving towards paths to make that transition easier. SkyWest is really one of the leaders in that. And then even Scott Kirby, who's now the CEO of United Airlines, and he recently got promoted during the pandemic as Oscar Muniz retired. He's a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy. He's not a pilot himself, but he certainly understands the business really, really well.
And just one little small example, one telltale is before it was like, you were making 25 grand and sleeping on your buddy's couch as an entry pilot. And I think the average wage for a pilot at that time was like 120 grand. It's now 200. And I know that there's colleges and certain airline academies that are actually giving signing bonuses, like cash, to get into the pilot training program. So there is certainly I don't know how long that stuff's gonna last, but just to educate the answer, that it should hopefully be easier and cheaper. But, when we're in our next conversation with those guys, we'll ask and see what the actuals are.
Last comment I want to make to this group before I forget is, again, to thank you all for your support of the flight program at Hobbs. A year ago, we were having some very difficult conversations. That's what I opened my remarks with. And this group dug deep. And it was a huge financial commitment, huge team effort that I know Jennifer really worked hard on, but everyone here in this community came together, and United really recognized and appreciated that. Denver was on the cut list. Denver was gone until we begged and pleaded them to give it another shot. And it was because of the way this group stepped forward that you still have Denver, and Denver is now, all the indicators are pointing in the right direction. So congratulations to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you so much for doing this, and we appreciate you coming today to our EDC social hour, and we hope to not see you until the Energy Flex Conference, which is June 5th and 6th. So please mark your calendars, and we will be sending save the dates and all kinds of things your way. But thank you so much for coming tonight.
Yes, it's always good to come to Lee County.